Hey there, welcome into the show. You're watching the San Francisco 49ers Report. My name is Chase Sr. Another loaded show coming your way as we're always talking all things Niners. San Francisco making a couple of roster moves that we got to talk about. We have some more Niners injury news. I know, I'm tired of it as well. And we also have some trade intel to dive into as well. But first, let's begin here. I'm getting close to 178,000 subscribers. What did you think that I meant? As you can see with the numbers here to my right, we're only 169 people away from reaching another milestone. So if you want to join the movement, lock us in, hit that subscribe button today, and what you get, daily free Niners shows. And anytime I'm talking about this football team, I want our content to be insightful, informative, entertaining, thought-provoking. I want your brains to work a little bit, but I also want you to be involved. So let's reach that milestone, and let's go San Francisco. Let's begin here with a couple of Niners roster moves. San Francisco signing defensive end Robert Beal to the active roster. Late round pick from a couple of years ago out of Georgia. Hasn't really panned out for him, but he does have elite athleticism. Can it finally translate? We'll see, but I don't think that's going to happen. The Niners also added linebacker Stone Blanton to the practice squad. He played his college football at Mississippi State. The Niners signed him as an undrafted free agent. They gave him some decent coin as a UDFA, meaning they thought he had a chance to be on the practice squad. He's an instinctual type of linebacker who lacks elite athleticism. Who does that sound like? Tatum Bethune. Has similar traits to Tatum Bethune, and that's what he did at Mississippi State. Made a name for himself as that smart and heady linebacker, and the Niners really like him as a player. So it's good to see him come back to the practice squad as another developmental piece there. Of course, the Niners a little bit thinner at that linebacker spot after the injury to Fred Warner. Then the 49ers released Trevis Gipson, who's contributed a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Then they re-signed him to the practice squad. And going into the Sunday game against the Houston Texans, this is a little bit of a problem because Bryce Huff's going to be out at least a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. These are the only healthy defensive ends for Sunday's game. 4 of them on the active roster. Mykel Williams, Sam Okuanu, Robert Beal, also 3. Trevis Gipson now on the practice squad. William Bradley King on the practice squad. And I would imagine all of these players have to suit up for the Niners. It's going to require some practice squad elevations, but San Francisco is very thin at defensive end for Sunday's game on the road against Houston. And you just wonder, how is it possible, right? How is it possible that the Niners can have all of these injuries for so many years consecutively outside of 2023? As under Kyle Shanahan, they've been top 10 in injury rate every single year since he was hired in 2017. How is it possible also for the Niners to have all these players who play in games, play well in games, sometimes dominate, finish games? They seem fine. Then we find out the day after, they're going to be out for a couple of weeks. I've never seen anything like this across the NFL. The Niners might be cursed on the injury front. And them not being healthy at defensive end and their pass rush taking a hit with these injuries is a big storyline for this game. Because this Texans offensive line, not good. This Texans offense, horrible. Did you see what they did on Monday night against the Seattle Seahawks? C.J. Stroud has regressed very quickly. Their offensive line could not block. And the Texans' scheme and offense as a whole looked like a JV unit. They were so confused and flustered as to what Mike Macdonald was drawing up, calling, and scheming up for Seattle against the Texans. And this Texans offensive line, 27th in run block win rate, 30th in pass block win rate. So it's unfortunate that these injuries are happening to the Niners in general, but especially right now, coming off one of their best performances of the year, definitely their best performance without Nick Bosa. Against Atlanta on Sunday Night Football, 22 pressures as a team, including 2 sacks. And that was a big reason why on defense, they were able to control the line of scrimmage, control the game, and they really helped out the offense in playing complementary football. And when I say this Texans offensive line is not good, I mean it. Look at this breakdown against Seattle. And sometimes this can happen when Mike Macdonald, who's a very creative, aggressive, exotic defensive mind, is drawing up all this crazy stuff throughout the game. You'll have lapses like this, but This is how the Texans offensive line has fared really against stunts all year. They've been confused. They haven't had answers, and obviously that's led to bad play for C.J. Stroud. But this is 3 Texans offensive linemen blocking one player and then one guy coming right up the middle, right in the face of C.J. Stroud. And so I know a lot of you are like, man, Chase, you picked the Texans, but how are they expected to get pressure on C.J. Stroud? That's obviously going to be a big weakness and a big concern for this team. Well, the Niners do have the luxury of having Robert Salah, who all year has been coaching his ass off. And it's pretty incredible that this Niners defense has been able to produce pretty well at a pretty solid clip and just keep their heads above water without Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. And Salah has this innate feel for the game as a play caller. And having feel as a play caller is a thing. And I think the Niners are still going to be able to generate pressure on C.J. Stroud because Salah has that feel of when to call and dial up a blitz. It's something that I've talked about. George Kittle even referenced it after the game. That sometimes when you do blitz, you can get burnt on that back end because you're sending the house at times or you're sending additional bodies when you blitz. That leaves, naturally, less guys on that back end. But Salah, down distance, time of the game, situationally. He's been calling these blitzes at the perfect time and hasn't really been burning San Francisco. He's also gotten creative with running twists, stunts, and gains up front, with simulating pressures, teasing blitzes, backing off, showing blitzes, actually blitzing. If not, loading the box and blitzing. Some of these guys are dropping back in coverage. And so this all comes down to the creative mind of Robert Salah, and look for him to be creative, exotic, and selectively aggressive again against Houston to try to win that matchup while shorthanded. On the Niners injury report, these players did not participate in practice today. Wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, knee. Cornerback Deommodore Lenoir, quad. Defensive end Bryce Huff, hamstring, doing work on the side. Jake Brendel, hamstring, doing work on the side. And Yetur Gross-Matos still out with that hamstring injury. The following players, these are limited participants. Brock Purdy, toe. Renardo Green, toe. Upton Stout, ankle. And so the Niners today, pretty decimated when you think of it in a macro sense. The Niners, without their top 3 defensive ends, Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos, Bryce Huff, without their top linebacker in Fred Warner, Deommodore Lenoir out, Upton Stout limited, Renardo Green also hurt. So Robert Salah has done a great job coaching-wise for the reasons that I mentioned, but he's making chicken salad out of chicken shit. And he's able to get this clay ball and mold it into something where this Niners defense is playing pretty damn well. As far as Ricky Pearsall goes, I tweeted this out, and I'm interested to see what everybody else thinks. I mean, at this point, is it fair to say Ricky Pearsall is injury prone? Training camp as a rookie before the unfortunate gunshot. Missed a lot of time with hamstring and shoulder injuries. Here we are in year 2. Had a hamstring during minicamp and to start training camp, missed time, and has had 2 separate knee issues this year. Super gifted player, but injured often to start his career. Kyle Shanahan did say the hope is that Deommodore Lenoir can practice with the Niners tomorrow on Thursday. We'll be live tomorrow, by the way, so subscribe, turn on your notifications, and join us. Lenoir's been playing lockdown ball. He's been penalized a lot, but I also don't like a lot of the penalties that have been called on the Niners' number 1 corner. For Brock Purdy, throwing like he did last week, he was on the field, helmet on, shoulder pads on, like last week, but I thought it was pretty telling during Sunday Night Football when there was that report that there is no timetable for Purdy's return. And Purdy had told the broadcast that with any sudden movement at any time, he can re-injure that toe. And obviously, he's being careful and mindful with this specific injury because of what happened against Jacksonville. But the Niners should have listened to me. Should have listened to Larry Krueger. We said going into that game, do not play Purdy. High risk of re-aggravation. He clearly wasn't right in practice all week. Sailing balls, throwing a bunch of balls high. What did it lead to in that Jags game? Overthrows and picks. Then he got re-injured. And so Shanahan said he's progressing, but still no timetable for his return. Coming up next here on the show, Niners trade rumors as San Francisco continues to be linked to a bevy of players all across the NFL. We'll get to that, but we got to hit our sponsor, our friends at PrizePicks, making today's 49ers report possible. Sign up today. Join the millions of users who have signed up and join the movement. This is America's #1 fantasy sports app, and it's very easy to play. You pick 2 to 6 players, you choose more or less on their stat projections, and you can win some big-time money. You can get your picks in less than 60 seconds. All withdrawals, fast, safe, and secure. We have so many knowledgeable football people who watch this show. Show me that you know ball by signing up with PrizePicks. And PrizePicks also has a couple of new features. It's the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on, let's say, Christian McCaffrey's rush yards, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on PrizePicks. Follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app. Copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just somebody whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. Let's roll with a 3-pick power play for Sunday. Chips, picks. CJ Stroud more than 200.5 passing yards. Christian McCaffrey more than 51.5 receiving yards. That's been a steal for us on a weekly basis because McCaffrey is top 10 in receiving yards. And then George Kittle. I think this is the week that he finds the end zone. More than a half rushing or receiving touchdown. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, let's move forward to the back half of the show. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. My name is Chase Sr. No matter where you are or how you're tuned in, as always, I greatly appreciate you for watching the show. And what I want to get into here, the Niners are linked to some of the top trade targets all across the NFL with the trade deadline looming. Obviously, this has to do with San Francisco being very banged up, especially on the defensive side of the ball. What's new? And when I canvass this roster right now, and you think about the injuries suffered to marquee players like Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, these are the top needs for the Niners right now and going into the deadline. Pass rush help. It can be at defensive tackle. It can be at defensive end. Linebacker with the Fred Warner injury. Obviously, pass rush without Nick Bosa. The offensive line. Spencer Burford's practice window was open today, and so that does give the Niners some more depth. They got very scared about having 2 centers injured on Sunday night, which is why Matt Hennessy and Nick Sakel didn't play at the same time. Now this gives you some more flexibility with Burford being back, but it's not like those options are great options. Although Kyle Shanahan going from less zone runs to more gap and power runs led to a lot of success on the ground for Christian McCaffrey, for this team as a whole, and it allowed this Niners offensive line to play more north-south. And they were able to really put a stamp with their physicality on that game against Atlanta. I'm going to put wide receiver on this list just because there have been so many injuries there. And then cornerback as well, lack of depth and injuries at that position too. Of note, said this a couple of times, but the NFL trade deadline after week 9, going into week 10, the official deadline is November 4th. Now, I've been talking about this for weeks. Shoot, I was talking about this last year when the Raiders were bad because guess what? The Raiders are bad once again. They're a joke of an organization. My favorite trade target for San Francisco, even more than Trey Hendrickson, is Max Crosby. He's a perfect Niner. He'd be a great scheme fit. He's wasting his career with the Raiders. We as football lovers, because I love this game, man, we want to see Max Crosby play meaningful football. He just plays the game the right way. With a lot of effort, fantastic technique, hustle, passion, dedication. He's tough. He's gritty. Number 98, although it's with Mykel Williams right now, but Max Crosby in a Niners uniform would be chills. But according to a report, the Raiders met with Crosby. They informed him they're not going to trade him. And Max Crosby told the Raiders he doesn't want to get traded. Now, he does have Raiders tatted on him, but if I'm Max Crosby, I want to go somewhere where I can actually play in games that matter as far as a playoff race. I want to play in the biggest of games, in the biggest of situations, when the lights are the brightest. But with the Raiders, nobody cares because that football team stinks. So it's unfortunate that he's so loyal to the Raiders. I respect it, But again, me as somebody who loves this game, who really appreciates what he does as a player, I want to see him go somewhere where he can really thrive for a winning team. And he'd be able to do that with the Niners. But it looks as though he is not going to get dealt. As for Trey Hendrickson, there continues to be reports every other day, seemingly, that the Niners are so interested in him. And as of right now, it doesn't look like Cincinnati is going to deal their top pass rusher and the former All-Pro who has led the NFL in sacks both in 2023 and in 2024. Nobody's had more. Here's what Jeremy Fowler said today on his ESPN article about Hendrickson. He would be far and away the most attractive trade target if Cincinnati entertains a deal. However, a team source told ESPN, as reported on October 14th, that the Bengals have no plan to trade the former All-Pro. The interest will be there regardless. And the San Francisco 49ers in particular consider Hendrickson an ideal fit. The Bengals' record, 3-4, and the team is in the thick of the AFC North race. All the more reason to keep its best defensive player. If they drop the next two games, maybe he becomes expendable. But the Bengals beating the Steelers last Thursday, led by Joe Flacco, 41 years old, over the 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers in one of the more entertaining games of the NFL season so far, not good news for all of us who want to see Hendrickson in a Niners uniform. Furthermore, ESPN linking the Niners to all of these players on their top 25 trade targets article. Chris Olave, wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. Jaelan Phillips, pass rusher for the Miami Dolphins. Logan Wilson, linebacker for Cincinnati. Arden Key, edge rusher for Tennessee and a former Niner. Kingsley Enagbare, edge rusher kind of dropping out of the rotation for Green Bay. And then Christian Harris, the linebacker for Houston, who is no longer starting, but knows the Niners scheme because he's played a lot under DeMeco Ryans, and he could be a veteran player for San Francisco. So obviously, a lot of interesting names on that list, a lot of players who we have talked about before. If I were to guess right now, I think it's edge rusher. I don't think the Niners go any other position. That includes linebacker, that includes wide receiver, that includes corner, and some of the other positions on this football team. This is also a pretty interesting name and idea that I want to talk about here. Good friend of the show, 49er Sports Talk, tweeting this out. Interesting little rumbling out there. The 49ers have reached out to the Las Vegas Raiders about potential defensive help per sources. It's not for Max Crosby, not available. The inquiry was about edge rusher Tyree Wilson. And this is intriguing for a couple of reasons, right? So Tyree Wilson, a lot of draft pedigree, an athletic freak at Texas Tech, still is an athletic freak. And in the pre-draft, he had this foot injury that scared a lot of teams away, didn't scare the Raiders away. Now, I didn't love the Raiders' selection of Tyree Wilson at the time because his college career was up and down. I personally like to draft players that high who have done a little bit more at the college level, who aren't just athletic projections, right? Because sometimes the miss rate on those types of players is high. That's ended up being true for Wilson. But talent clearly there, which is why he was a top 10 pick, 7th overall, only in 2023. So he's also still young and moldable. I think that the Niners could develop a player like this. He has great size, 6'6", 263 pounds. The Raiders have used him at defensive end. They've used him at defensive tackle. They have dropped him back in coverage at times. We saw that in the preseason game against the Niners. The Raiders, most likely, because he's been a bust up to this point, will not pick up his fifth-year option. He's been said to be unhappy with the situation with Las Vegas, and he's had a good amount of injuries so far. Hasn't led to him missing a lot of games, but obviously that's notable because of the Niners' history with injuries. Another interesting nugget here with Tyree Wilson. Chris Kocurek, the Niners defensive line coach and one of the top defensive line coaches in the NFL, played his college football at Texas Tech. And if Tyree Wilson doesn't like the situation with the Raiders, he still has a lot of family in Texas, which is where he grew up. That's where he went to high school. He's been said to really want to play in the state of Texas, or at least close to it. Obviously, San Francisco and Santa Clara, far away from Texas. But the familiarity of Chris Kocurek and the talent as far as coaching of Chris Kocurek could make the Niners an intriguing destination for Tyree Wilson. And I can see some comparisons between Wilson and these three players. And these three players on your screen, Chris Kocurek projects who came to the Niners previously labeled as busts. Arden Key was drafted by the Raiders. The Niners signed him in free agency. They turned him into a really good player. And he played defensive end and defensive tackle, and Chris Kocurek really maximized Arden Key, got him on the right track. Charles Omenihu is a player who the Niners traded for at the 2021 trade deadline. Now, he was a later round pick out of Texas by the Houston Texans, but he wasn't really working out with Houston. He comes to the Niners, and he was a really important member of that defensive line the year that they made it to the NFC Championship game in 2021. He played so well for San Francisco, he ended up getting paid by the Kansas City Chiefs. He, like Arden Key, played a little bit of defensive tackle and a little bit of defensive end. Clelin Ferrell was a top 5 pick by the Raiders. That was the John Gruden, Mike Mayock regime. I remember being in Nashville for that draft on Broadway. And when the Raiders drafted Clelin Ferrell, there was an audible gasp from Raiders fans. They couldn't believe it. And Ferrell did not work out with Las Vegas. He comes to the Niners, and I'm not going to quite say he resurrected his career, but he played pretty damn well as a rotational player. Then he went to Washington, played pretty well there. Adam Peters brought him in, and now he's with the Chargers practice squad. He, too, played a little bit of defensive end and a little bit of defensive tackle. That's what Tyree Wilson would be able to do. And so if I'm him, his career hasn't worked out with the Raiders. Sometimes that's where players go for their careers to die. Or if they're young players and they don't work out, they become busts. But we've seen them work out with other organizations. The foundation is there for Tyree Wilson. The skill set is there for Tyree Wilson. I think he needs a better scheme. I think he needs better coaching. And I think the Niners would be able to bring that out of him. His career numbers up to this point. He dealt with that foot injury in 2023, had 3.5 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 2 TFLs. Last year in 2024, 4.5 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, 6 TFLs. This year, he has 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 4 TFLs. Again, those numbers aren't crazy, right? But I think there's a better player in there, and I'd bank on Robert Salah and Chris Kocurek being able to bring that out of him and tapping into that athletic background. Wilson in 2025, how he grades according to Pro Football Focus. Again, there's a foundation to build off of here. Overall PFF grade of 58.2, pass rush grade of 59.1, run defense grade of 52.7, 12 pressures, 2 hits, 6 hurries. And so I put together this trade idea, and I got with Mitchell Renz, the host of the Raiders Report. I'm sending the Raiders a 2026 fourth-round pick, and he said, I think that would do it. The Niners get Tyree Wilson. Another notable here is that Kyle Shanahan has said, we want players who can help us, preferably now and in the future. Well, Tyree Wilson is under contract for 2026, and if you exercise his 5th-year option, 2027 as well. Now, it's a little bit pricier because he's a first-round pick, but it's not as pricey as giving a contract extension to a Trey Hendrickson or trading for another highly priced player who's currently on a contract extension or will be needing one. For Tyree Wilson, you've got him at least for the next 2 years beyond this year on that rookie deal, which is pretty affordable if you think that you can bring the best out of him. And so Tyree Wilson, a name to watch and a name that I'd be interested in going into the deadline. What say you? Would you make that trade if you were the Niners? A simple yes or no. Join the conversation down in the comment section. Do not forget to subscribe. Thanks to everybody for supporting the show. Myself and Chip, we will be live on Thursday, so we'll see you then.